Okay, for many people, the holidays are times of great celebration with family and friends. Often, this includes travel and staying in other people's homes. However, this year, the holiday season, as you know, is going to be quite different. Traveling, staying in other people's homes, and gathering in large groups may not be safe. There's no easy answers as we try to navigate during COVID-19, especially if you're at high risk for serious complications of COVID-19. Some of you may feel like you can only get together virtually. Some of you may need not to travel to other family and loved ones as you usually would. And some may not be traveling to see you. Um, and others may feel a little safer if they do some outdoor activities with social distancing. But no matter what form you feel is the safest and best way to celebrate the holidays this year, I think it's safe to say it's going to be quite different for most of us. And the traditions that we have become used to, we may not be able to do. Many of us have become used to having some important and long traditions for our holiday celebrations. Change is difficult for most people, especially when these changes seem out of control. Along with this, many are feeling COVID fatigue. They're feeling depressed moods and increased anxiety as a result of this prolonged pandemic. As both a minister and a licensed psychotherapist, I think it's important that we not ignore our feelings and emotions as we enter these holiday seasons. Instead of ignoring them, we need to consider how to cope with them. In our attempt to cope with change, we need to first of all acknowledge what we are losing. Some of us have lost loved ones this last year that will no longer be part of our holiday celebrations. I, for instance, lost my mother this last December, which will greatly affect our usual tradition during Thanksgiving and Christmas. Some people have lost jobs because of this pandemic. Many are living with less income than in previous years. And even if you have not lost those type of things, we have all lost a sense of normalcy this year. Many of us will have to celebrate the holidays without our normal traditions. No matter what our losses, it is important to acknowledge what we have lost. It is also important that we take time to grieve our losses as we enter the holiday season. After acknowledging and grieving what we have lost, it is important that we still find the desire to make the holidays special. In my ministry as both a pastor and psychotherapist, I acknowledge that for some, even under normal circumstances, the holidays are anything but joyous. I encourage them, even if they're going through a tough time or tough losing people, that I encourage them to still do the holiday anyway. One of my favorite Christian hymns is written by, it's a poem from Henry Longfellow, and you probably know it. I heard the bells on Christmas Day. The hymn was written by Longfellow during a time that the world seemed hopeless as the American Civil War was raging. If you know the hymn, you know that he said that hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. 2 years before writing this poem, which became a hymn, Longfellow's personal peace and well-being was shaken when his wife of 18 years, whom he loved deeply, was burned to death in an accidental fire. Longfellow wrote this hymn on Christmas Day in 1863. He shares his anguish and frustration in this poem, he was upset that the bells kept ringing and he kept bringing peace on earth, goodwill to men. He says in this poem, in the next to last refrain, in despair, I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. I don't know about you, but that reminds me of today. In the last verse, however, he writes, "Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men." Many, even under non-pandemic years, see themselves entering the holidays with a similar situation as Longfellow. However, even with those types of grief and anguish, it is important to acknowledge the bells that remind us that hope continues, even in our grief and in our despair, even in COVID-19. Others of us are not experiencing some of that anguish. However, most of us are experiencing loss and major change in our holidays. We may need to allow ourselves for this holiday season, especially, to establish a new tradition, at least for this year. Do the grief of lost traditions so you do not grudgingly celebrate this year. And finally, allow, in spite of the losses and changes, to practice Thanksgiving and Christmas with gratitude and Veterans Day. Yes, there are losses and many differences this year. However, we need to make a conscious effort to consider what we have to be thankful for. It can be broad categories such as health or having a roof over your head. For others, it may be more specific things, but allow yourself to be grateful that in spite of this pandemic, that you can still celebrate the holidays. Who knows? You may even discover some new traditions that you may wish to add when the pandemic is over. Before closing my part of the presentation, I want to recognize that some may be experiencing major mental health issues as well. If that is so, do not ignore those issues and seek professional help. In closing, I'd like to include a prayer that was written by a close minister friend of mine, Eva Sullivan Knopf, who is the director of the Journey Center of Chicago, which is a very important ministry that helps lots and lots of people that have a tough time just in general. And she wrote this prayer, which I think is very fitting for now. And this one's about Thanksgiving, but it applies to all the holidays. During this Thanksgiving season, our hearts are immensely heavy, and so we lament. COVID has taken so many lives and has isolated us from one another. Racism and white supremacy have claimed too many lives as they evoke evil on the Black community. A stressful political environment has us on edge. It has been a year of pandemics, and if that isn't enough, other heartbreaks that have pushed in on us, the loss of work, relationship, community, and storms of every kind. And we wonder as we cry out, how long, O God? This year has been murky, and yet knowing that you are a God who invites lament is a gift beyond itself. We not only have freedom to lament, but you beckon us to draw close and to pour our hearts out to you. You invite us to share our tears of sorrow, to speak our sadness, and give you the burdens, the weight upon us. We are reminded in the midst of all else that you care about us, that you are Emmanuel, God with us. Even when we can't see, you remain near. Your presence is made known through simple acts of kindness. Though those who embody you and your compassion, through those who embody you and your compassion, through simple things like sunshine and wind chimes, and a warm greeting from a friend or a neighbor. So though we come with heavy hearts, we are grateful that we can do so, and to name it all to you, who holds us when we can't stand anymore and when there's no tears left. Thank you, compassionate God, for the ways you reveal yourself to us. Open our eyes that we may recognize more We offer this, our pandemic Thanksgiving, and we can add the other holidays, knowing you hurt with us and you never leave our side. Amen. Thank you. You're on mute.
Thank you, Phil. Really important thoughts. Well done. So appreciate your wisdom. And that prayer was really an embracing, engulfing, and encompassing prayer. So fitting.
Yes, I went to a conference on prayer several years ago, and they never mentioned the laments. And I thought, you can't do a thing on prayer without the laments, because they're an important part of prayer, an important part of our life. We have to allow laments. So anyway,
they do. We're part of our breathing, the rhythm of life.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
To exclude them is to exclude a major portion of our whole experience.
And I've been lamenting a lot for a few years now, like you all have. So not just with the pandemic, but with what's going on in our country and world. So thank you.
Thank you much. Okay, my part of making the presentation and giving some thoughts is to open up some creativity for you. And I'm pulling off of two words in the title: choices and honoring. And so how can we do that? Choices is the first operative word that we have to approach these holidays. If it's to include the lament, owning the feelings, the many things that Phil mentioned, or whatever it involves, remember you have choices. You're not frozen and you're not monopolized. This just is not going to be a normal Christmas. And compared to, very few people are going to have a normal one compared to last year's or the prior ones. So I have made 4 focus points that I'm going to hit on. I'm going to show you the 4. And I will not talk with them while the screen is shared. I'm just going to read them and then I'll break them down. I think if we focus on these 4 areas, we can develop a plan to approach or have options. Let me put that word, because there's no shoulds here. It's about your own essence, energy, and creativity. First, you have choices. Set aside expectations. Develop new rituals and self-care. Those are the pieces that I want to focus on. Now let me expand just a little bit. Remember, despite the feeling you may have, you are in charge. You're not in charge of the circumstance that has happened or created the feelings, or that we can't travel to be together. But you are in charge of making choices that can provide some distance, or as Shay Darian would say, some tempering from the grief and loss, or to add the pieces of celebration as well. I recommend that you cut the shoulds out. If you find something running through your head that said, I should do this for this holiday, I should do that, shoulds are 98% of the time somebody else's expectation that you've bought into. So I would recommend to cut the shoulds. And stop and evaluate. If it's somebody else's expectation, lay it down for a while, see how it feels, see what opens up then that would give you something new to think about or some new way to do it. In setting aside your expectations, I have a friend who's had a famous quote. She's had a major loss with known her for 40 some years. She had a child die with SIDS at the age of 6 months. He'd be the same age as our son. She's gone through a divorce. lost her parents, lost friends, other losses. And she has a phrase that's just Nancy's phrase. When she's hearing expectations about holidays, and particularly Christmas, she says this: cut the Norman Rockwell scene. Because she said the thing that gets her most is seeing this idealistic, optimum beauty piece that's supposed to happen, and some years that doesn't take place, and some years, several years in a row, it doesn't take place. So I share with you Nancy's phrase. William Shakespeare said, expectations are the root of all heartache. I'm going to edit it just a tad. I think it's unrealistic expectations that inevitably create heartache. And if we have unrealistic expectations of what is to happen, we bring the heartache on ourselves. So evaluating, is it realistic for me to expect this to take place or that to take place? And if the answer is no, lay that expectation aside. Third one, develop new rituals. You can develop more than one. I'm going to offer one today. I'm going to expand on it. They all can fit under the theme of light. It doesn't mean you have to keep it in 2021. It means develop at least one new one for 2020. You might develop more than one, that's fine. And you might decide to keep them, that's fine. But do at least one, if not more, for 2020. Because we've already discussed our old rituals are impossible. Traveling, getting together, sitting around the table, big groups. So we have to adjust to that. And one of the major adjustments we need to own is for those that physically don't have the people they love here on earth with them. That is a major loss, such as those who've lost a husband, wife, spouse, mother, child. Those are major, major heartaches. But the best way I know to deal with that is to focus on the second word in our title, honoring. Honoring is such a vital part of our spirituality. So today I'm going to joint use the word honoring and memorializing, because we're going to honor those we can't be with that are alive, and we're going to memorialize those who are physically absent from this planet Earth. And so as we focus on that, the word blessing is part of our own development of learning to give blessing for, blessing to, and to receive blessings. To quote Jan Richardson, a famous author, a blessing most often meets us in the place of our greatest need, our greatest desperation, pain, or lack. Blessing typically has a qualification of invocation. It's unconscious sometimes it's spoken, but it's a calling upon God to ask for aid or to journey with us in that moment, or to acknowledge that God is there and being open to the heart of what God has to offer in response. And a blessing lets us then have our response to pause and to do honoring and memorializing. I'm going to quote Jan Richardson again. She has a marvelous book on blessings for every season of the year. You'll see it at the end of our presentation, at the very end, after we share our litany. The title of that book will be there. But to quote her, a blessing is something wild because it leads us to where we did not imagine to go, and it's never in a straight line. That's the nature of blessing and the nature of God, who meets us in the moment, within time and beyond it, encompassing us season by season in a circle of grace. And what I'm going to suggest that we focus on to do that honoring and memorializing for this year is to focus on light, all capitals, L-I-G-H-T, representing God God's love, the divine. You know, the stars are always shining. I hate to tell you, but I was an adult before I knew that. I hadn't figured out, I was mid-20s, and somebody said, well, the stars are out and the sun was shining. And I said, the sun's shining. And they said, well, the stars are shining somewhere. And have you ever been to an observatory? I said, no. So we made an appointment to go to an observatory, and there in the daytime, looked up, could see the stars at night in the daytime. What an enlightening aha for me as far as the planet, because I never thought about it. I was just unconscious about it. So they're always shining. It matters not what's going on. And because the stars are always shining, it means that everything is always right, even if there's clouds covering them up or a haze with which we can't see them clearly. The sun is our biggest visible star. Now, isn't that interesting? Because God is our biggest visible light. Something in our universe speaks to the same metaphor. And as we draw closer to Christmas, we'll begin to talk about the star over Bethlehem. I don't think it's any coincidence that that's in the story. God, the ultimate light, is never absent from us during Thanksgiving or Christmas. Even if we can't feel it or we can't feel its presence, don't be alarmed. Because sometimes what we're feeling, what we're thinking in the moment is just a veil between owning that and being aware of it. It's not that it's gone away. So I'm going to suggest that you make an altar for the holidays. And the first time I threw that thought out on paper, I thought, okay, somebody in the group's going to say, wait a minute, the altar's where we worship. Well, a lot of things happen on the altar. Worship's one of them. But an altar is a point of focus. It's a visual place of focus. And it's a place to go with intention. It's a place to go with intention. So if you develop an altar for this holiday, it could be very meaningful in a lot of ways. And I'm going to tell you how to play out, because it's going to happen different for every one of you. You can pick a small table, do it in the middle of your dining room table, do it on an end table, any room, anywhere is fine. I recommend you use battery operated LED candles, so you're not worried about fire. And the Church of the Palms has for you 2 to every household. They're bigger than this. They're taller and they're curved and they have a little design to them. They have a soft light. They're battery operated. They're at the church desk, 2 to a household. 1 for honoring and 1 for memorializing to put on your altar. I want to show you the altar I threw together yesterday, just to give you an idea. Doesn't have to be like mine. I chose to put mine on a plate, live in a smaller place, and so don't have a lot of side tables. But here's my altar. I've got a picture of our son. I've got the honoring and the memorializing. My dad's dead. My grandparents are dead. My favorite aunts are dead. Just had an uncle die 2 weeks ago. I have a little memento of Eric's childhood. I have an ornament sitting back here. And I have a little book, piece of paper and a pen, or a little book at your altar where you capture your blessings, your thanksgivings, your thoughts, your feelings. It doesn't take much to create an altar that become extremely meaningful for you in a time of creating something new to do. You can make it as big as you want. Put all the family photos out there if you want to. Make a whole display. But do something that gives you a place to go with intention and focus as often as you need, maybe weekly, maybe daily, but let it be yours. Some questions you might consider to write in response to. What do I do when I get there? We don't have to do anything. It may just come to you. Just being there may be enough. And you write down, being here was enough. But you might say, what are memories that are special when I ponder this? When I come to this place to honor and memorialize my uncle that I just lost, what memory is special? What ways did that person bring light to my life as I'm looking at the light of the candles? What blessings do I wish to send them? What blessings do I want to send those who aren't with me today that normally would be? What blessings have I received from them? What blessings has God given me? What unexpected ones have shown up? Where has God sent light when I thought there would be none in this last year? And what light have I given this last year? To whom have I been light? And what can I take away from this focused time, this one time, one word, one phrase, to hold on till I come back to the altar the next time? Just some suggested questions. You don't have to use them all, but just some thoughts. Then we move to our fourth and last focus point, which is self-care. This has been a restless time of sleep for almost everybody I know, for about 10 reasons per individual. And it's been not predictable, not like we've been in charge of it. There's been underlying anxiety, underlying grief, loss. Rest when you can, even if it's just to put your feet up and take the weight off of your body. Take a nap if you need. Sleep when you can. But if you can set a ritual of getting routine sleep, that's marvelous. If you don't be upset with yourself. There's been a lot going on, and the holidays will bring up other emotions. Stay hydrated, not just because we're in the desert and the high heat's gone, but high emotional times are physiologically dehydrating to us. We're working hard inside, and tears are water. Our cells are crying, our heart's crying, and you get dehydrated before you know it. So stay dehydrated. Pick up the phone. Be an initiator. Do a Zoom, do a FaceTime, do a phone call. One of the myths for most of my clients who struggled with being extremely lonely or were in hard times and felt maybe nobody was caring was almost to a person they believed everybody else ought to be the initiator, not them. And I had to tell them, that's not how life works. If you need a conversation, you need to pick up the phone. If you do the practice of doing that, others do the practice of doing that in return. Don't assume you can just sit and it's going to happen. So connect with somebody from the past you haven't talked to in a long time. Connect with those that are important to you during these holidays. And the other thing too is move. If you've been in a chair for 2 hours, get your body up, go to another room. Step outside, go for a walk. Move your body. Do some stretches. Bend over, side to side. Moving your body is moving the emotional load we carry, which lets it have a release too, which is vitally important. Have all of this up with here with magnetic things is why I keep reaching. It's a good way for me to keep track of what I'm saying. Keep the routines that you can keep. Now we know COVID's disrupted them, but we've all found our own routine in COVID right now. So keep your routine as best you can. And the best thing regarding that is develop a plan for Thanksgiving Day. Not all day if you don't need to, but at least for 2 to 3 hour focus, okay? Develop a plan, because in your mind, you're going to know that's a holiday. So plan to do something different. The other thing is develop a plan for Christmas Eve and for Christmas Day. And let's jump into moving into 2021 for New Year's Day. Probably the 3 most important are Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day. Plan something. If it's to watch a favorite movie, if it's to, have you ever watched a movie with a friend by Zoom? That's possible. Is it set a time to have a family gathering where you can catch up with 8 people at once, or plan something to do for those 2 days. I'm going to reiterate what Phil said, which is vitally important. Don't shut down your emotions. Your emotions in the holidays, as well as all times, but particularly in the holidays, are there because you loved and you were loved. That's why they're there. So don't shut that love down. I have a great little book that I give to adults that I started using when I first became a family therapist with children. It's called Double Dip Feelings. It's a marvelous little book. The adults enjoyed it more than the kids did. And it's, you can have 2 emotions at once. You can be joyful and tearful. You can be sorrow and glad. You can hurt and have joy. More than one emotion can go on. So just don't shove them down. Return to scriptures, poetry, favorite pictures, things that have deep meaning to you. Keep some at hand. In fact, in the next 2 weeks, just gather some up and put them in a pile. Might put them next to your altar so that you can reach to them. You don't have to go searching and hunting. Other piece of self-care, give yourself a blessing. Try it 3 days a week. If you can do it every day a week, good for you. But have you thought about, we do gratitudes off at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day? What about a blessing per day for you? Joan Chittister says the most courage anybody uses in their life is to get out of bed every morning. And that's true, because life's hard. So give yourself a blessing. And all of this is hard work, but I want you to remember, you are loved, you are loving, you have been loved, and you still love. And you are still loved. So with that, I'm going to move us to a Q&A. And then I have a litany blessing for us to read together at the end when we get through with our Q&A time. So if everybody wishes to unmute, we might have answers. We might have questions to feed back to you. Ask anything you want, share anything you feel comfortable to. And whatever you choose to share during this time stays in this group with these people. This is a private Q&A when we're talking about hard times and taking care of ourselves during the holidays. So unmute yourself, and anybody who wants to start with responses or comments, feel free to. Did I see your hand up, Mary?
No, I was changing my setting.
Oh, you were changing your setting. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I'll give a quick little example, which falls right into what Kay's talking about, but I didn't know it was going to be. My mother died in March. My parents' anniversary is tomorrow. And usually in December, I send out, I've been the keeper of the addresses for my siblings and the next generation. And it was always important for my mom to have the current addresses and phone numbers for her Christmas card list. Well, I did it a week ago, and I headed it something like in honor of my parents' anniversary. We are all family. And I mailed that out, and they should get all of them should have it by tomorrow. And so as Kay's talking about this, so and Phil, you know, maybe it's something that I end up doing next year. Same thing. It's a way to keep their memory together, and to honor them too. So unintentionally, I've done something just like the two of you are talking about, but I think it helped me to process that, and perhaps it'll keep some of the family members more connected.
Thanks for sharing it. That's a great example.
One of the new rituals that those of us at the church might think about this year for Christmas Eve is to do luminaries on the labyrinth. It was our intent to do that last year. We had all the materials ready, volunteers, and we got just enough rain early on that we canceled the event. But we've been asked again this year to be a part of the Christmas Eve activities on the labyrinth. So I'm hoping that that can become not just for this year because of the virus, but years to follow, a new ritual for some as we use the labyrinth as an altar, a place of worship, and do it with luminaries.
Good. Good. Pam, you had your hand up.
Yeah, and Paul does also.
Okay.
I particularly like Nancy's idea, I think, because through the years, I think probably all of our families get scattered around and you lose touch with somebody, and yet if you needed to get in touch with people, it would be good if everybody knew where everybody was and how to reach them. So I like that idea. Paul?
And our celebration of Thanksgiving will be one of a Thanksgiving of two in our house. But spending that day and the preceding day and the after day on the phone or by Zoom, connecting with family. And I think particularly a connection that we would have is with my daughter and the family, because their house was burned to the ground and they had nothing, but they're making a sort of a new life for themselves.
Wow.
I have a son and a stepdaughter. Both of them are nurses in the San Francisco area. And my son works in the emergency room. And you can imagine you sure how tiring their work is.
Yes.
So we think of them and pray for them.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. You remind me that Max, having been a minister, you live an itinerant life, which is rarely do you stay in the same town all the time. So often we were too far away to go home for holidays. And so part of the ritual became, for us as a couple, we pretty quickly, wherever we've moved, formed an extended family. People that were friends and felt like family because they were family. So don't let us forget that extended family, maybe, and for us right now, some people in the church, a couple of people in the community, extended family, let us not forget their importance in our life and to make a phone call to them and to reach out to. It doesn't have to be biological. For us in our marriage, most of our holidays have not been around biological tables. They've been with other people. Howard.
I don't know enough about the organization patterns at Church of the Palms, but as far as being able to regularly or occasionally contact somebody that we don't know, I rather suspect in a group the size that we have, there are an awful lot of people that are really isolated. I assume the pastors have plans to regularly contact them, or the appropriate committees are working on that. I don't know.
The care team takes charge of that. We have the care team takes charge of that. We have a list of homebound, those that are in assisted living. And when COVID hit, he developed a list of those that live alone. And those of us on the care team called the people who lived alone and asked, would you like us to call you weekly, every 2 weeks? And several of them said, I have family here. I have a great friend next door, lifelong friend. They'll do the checking on me. We don't need you to do it. But Jim activated the care team. If you want to be a person who does phone calls for the care team, they would greatly appreciate your volunteer hours. So don't hesitate to call Jim and say, I could be a care team member that could make phone calls. One of the things that will take place at Christmas is, particularly for those that are homebound and in nursing homes, the care team divides up and they will get a little sack of something. We don't spend much, maybe $5, but they'll get a little Christmas gift. And so if you want to be a part of the care team, just call Jim and say, tell me what my options are, and you don't have to do anything you're not uncomfortable with. You just do what you're comfortable with and be part of a care team.
I think that's wonderful information, at least for me, and I'm imagine for many others. Many times we feel we have to be asked, and that's, it's that just isn't where it needs to be. We just have to step out.
Yeah.
That does so much when we make that effort.
Right. Bobby.
One thing that I've tried to do is go through the directory and see people that I don't know. Unfortunately, I have a Colorado phone number, so people don't answer my phone calls. But I always leave a message, just I'm, from the church. I just wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing, if you need anything, and then give them my phone number. Most times I don't get a response, but my intention is just to contact them and let them know that they're, my saying, you are loved.
Yeah. Good. Did I see another hand?
Oh,
Nancy.
I just share a cute little thing that happened this last week. I got an email from a longtime friend in Wisconsin. It was very obscure, and it wasn't one of those spam ones asking for money or, bail me out because I'm stuck overseas and have lost my passport. None of that stuff, but real obscure terms. And I thought, well, okay, maybe she's trying to do something as a surprise for her husband. So I called, and it turned out it indeed was a spam thing. Her her computer website her computer name had been hacked. But I had the loveliest conversation with somebody that's been a longtime friend, haven't talked to her in a year, and her husband. And so it was all because of this spam email that I got. So yeah, I think, and they welcomed that time with me. So I think lots of people would enjoy a spontaneous phone call. Just tell them you got a spam. You can tell them I got a spam email and start it off that way. So.
You're telling us to lie?
Okay, make something else up then.
Or I was just thinking of you and I wanted to call.
Yes. Okay, that's better.
That extended family that Kay talked about has been crucial in my life. In fact, I was recalling, I just were in conversation with three very important ones within the last week or so. I have a minister friend who ministers in Wisconsin. He's in a progressive United Methodist church, and he and I have gone through our journeys together pretty much, and for the last many decades. And if there's anybody out there that knows me as well as my wife does, it would be him. And so we kind of share. And this last week, we've shared both joy and laments both because of some things that happened. And then there's a couple friends that my wife and I connected with from where we came from in Illinois. And same thing with that. And then her brother and his wife have become very close. And so we connected with them. And those have always, I don't think I would be healthy without that, you know? But to have those kind of people in my life, I had to allow myself to open up and allow people to see me inside. And that's tough to do sometimes because me inside has really, really neat things and has really broken things, you know? So being able to share all of that, I have found to be very healthy. And that's what helps me to make it through these difficult days. So connecting with the church here, that's been very helpful too, because, you know, we just moved here about a year and a half ago, and we were part of the same church for 2 decades. So which is the longest, but because being a pastor, my longest ministry was 13 years as a pastor. So like you said, we kind of move around for ministers, you know, so, but when I shifted from pastoring to psychotherapy, I was actually there for 2 decades. So I was in the same church for 2 decades. So leaving that was tough. But finding you all, you know, has been a blessing and help through this tough time. So we're very fortunate. Thank you.
It's a blessing for us too, Phil.
Thank you.
Yes, Paul. Paul Hiles.
Yeah, Phil got me rethinking. I originally was planning on not doing anything for Christmas because it just reminded me the house is empty.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out sort of how to have Christmas, but not, you know, just not as a reminder that the house is empty.
That's very well to have Christmas, but don't set it up so that it reminds me that the house is empty. That's a very focused goal. And you're a creative person. I'll be interested to learn when you figure that out, what you share, because that to say that's what we say I don't want is the door to what will work. When you know what you don't want, then the door opens to what will work. That's a great idea.
One of my favorite things, you know, since I was a little kid was to have a tree with the lights on and no other lights in the house and just sit there and stare at the tree.
Mhm.
Well, this
We have a neighbor.
Thanksgiving.
Go ahead.
No,
We have a neighbor who puts theirs on the patio back so we all could see it.
in acknowledging loss, for me, this will be the first Thanksgiving without my mom. And that was one holiday where we always got there, because sometimes when I was a pastor at Christmas, I had to be there for Christmas Eve service and everything. And last year, ironically, we almost always went Thanksgiving Day. But last year we went a week early, and I forget exactly why, but by Thanksgiving, a week after we were there celebrating with my mom, that's when she started to go downhill. So, and we put her into hospice care and all that type of stuff. And then she died in December. So, it's going to be a different Thanksgiving because we always travel to Ohio, to where my mom lived, for Thanksgiving. And, but we're still going to do it, and it's interesting because we had that tradition. My kids out here had their own tradition, because we went to my mom's. We did Christmas with them, but not Thanksgiving. So even just in general, doing Thanksgiving differently is going to be something that we do. So, but we're still going to do it. In fact, I was talking with my wife the other day. What will we do for Thanksgiving this year? Because, we don't know. We might get together outside with social distancing somewhat with our kids and grandkids, but, having a meal together, that's another thing, and there's some safety risks on doing that. So we may not do that. So anyway, it's going to be different. But I think we decided that we still have to do it, and we have to make it an important time, even if it's different. And I really believe that. I mean, as a pastor, and both a therapist, I've always have a sad part of me during the holidays too, because even now I'm only doing psychotherapy 2 days a week because I'm mostly retired. And, I have some that are going through divorce. I have some that recently lost loved ones. I have some that, with being cooped up in the house with everybody, there's domestic issues of all sorts going on. And it's a tough time for a lot of people. And it always is a tough time for a lot of people. I think that's why Longfellow's poem has been an important one for me, because it recognizes that sometimes the holidays are tough because of things going on. But it also reminds us that we still do it. The bells still ring. So I appreciate you sharing, Paul, about, you deciding to do something for Christmas, even though you're by yourself, because I think it's important to not just do nothing. I think it's important to make it special, even if it's a tough special. And I know for us, Thanksgiving will be a tough special, but it will still be special. So
I like that language. It'll be a tough special. That's real. That's grounded. I like that phrase, Phil. Paul, you unmuted. You want to share something?
I'm just thinking while you're talking.
Oh, okay. I have a couple of friends who know each other in Springfield, Illinois, had said for Thanksgiving they were having if the weather's good, okay, and right now it's heaven there compared to here, but they're going to have a lawn chair driveway Thanksgiving dinner, and everybody's bringing their own sandwiches. I thought, well, why not? I mean, why not? And I just thought, I said, well, that's pretty creative. He said, that way nobody's touching the food. Nobody's at risk. We'll sit far enough apart. We won't hug, but we want to see each other. I thought, well, that's pretty good. So yeah, it's doing it different.
Yeah.
Mary?
I think just to add on to for Paul and what Phil said. I think being intellectual beings, I don't think we can just ignore a holiday. I just don't think that works. You can't just say, I'm not going to do anything, because we know that the holiday is there. We know that it's occurring. So I don't think that solution will work. So the hard special certainly seems like what we have to do.
There's your realistic expectation, Mary. Beautifully said. To ignore it will make it worse. But to say, have a realistic expectation that we'll do a hard Thanksgiving, we'll do a hard Christmas, whatever it is, it's going to be hard, but it'll be better, and psychologically better, spiritually better for you than if you do nothing. You will be literally miserable. And so that, I think that's the important piece. Anybody else have anything they wish to share? I can't believe the time has flown by so quickly. Anybody else have anything they wish to share?
Well, I'll just offer this as an idea. What Richard and I've done for the last few years on Thanksgiving and Christmas is we go for a hike, one of the local parks, and we have an alternative meal. So when everybody else is having the big, and we often have another couple with us. So instead of having the big Thanksgiving turkey and all, we have turkey sandwiches, pumpkin bars, sweet potato fries. So we have the traditional type of food. It's just in a different format. And it's worked out really well. You get a little exercise, you're outside. You can certainly this year do the social distancing for the meal. So it's an alternative to an indoor celebration. And I share that with you.
Thank you. Great idea. I'm going to, one of these days, I'm going to randomly have lunch at the table around the labyrinth. I might invite somebody to join me. That nice table sitting there with the benches. Why not?
Yeah.
You know? Plus, we do have a lot of beautiful parks and walkways to do that.
I appreciate the labyrinth. I live close to the church, so that's a place that I go sometimes just to meditate. And I find that to be a very nice place to do that. So I'm glad that you put that in, I think just a few years ago, didn't you?
Right.
So
yeah. So
if you want the history, talk to Max. He built it from stone to stone.
Thanks, Max. You've helped my spiritual life.
Well, as we close today, I found a beautiful blessing from Jan Richardson. I've put it on big print, and I think it's better said than read, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to have us all mute ourselves. I'm going to show it on the screen. I'll start it off and let us do a litany together with us all on mute, and then we'll pull back together to say holiday blessings to each other. Okay? Can you see that? Okay. Let's begin with the title. Blessed are you who bear the light. Blessed are you who bear the light in unbearable times, who testify to its endurance amid the unendurable, who bear witness to its persistence when everything seems in shadow and grief. Blessed are you in whom the light lives, in whom the brightness blazes, your heart a chapel, an altar, where in the deepest night can be seen the fire that shines forth in you, in unaccountable faith, in stubborn love, hope, in love that illumines every broken thing it finds. From the book Circle of Grace, Blessings for All the Seasons. So if you want to, I was going to see if I can unmute all. But go ahead and unmute yourselves. Okay. Blessings on the choices you make, on the expectations you lay aside, on the realistic expectations you pick up, on the new ritual or rituals you form, and on your self-care and doing the spiritual and emotional work of the season that Phil so beautifully outlined for us.